On this week's episode, we're discussing all things guide dogs.
Yes, come with me, me specifically as a guide dog user, and I will tell you everything you did and didn't ever want to know about guide dogs.
So stick around.
Hello, and welcome to Rare with Flair,
the podcast where two best friends with the same rare disease are out here living our best lives. I'm your host, Casey.
And I'm your host, Cassandra. Wow. It is hot, guys. It is so hot.
Oh, it is so hot. We pray and dream of the summer, and then it comes.
Then it comes.
We're very hot. We're very hot, but
I know you're hot. Ooh.
Oh, hi. My friend literally called me today and was like, I'm so hot. I was like, yeah, you are. Different friend, but, you know, we got to lift each other up. Got to butter each other
Women
up.
got to stick together. We got to remind each other that, you know, you may be warm in temperature, but you're also caliente.
Warm. Yeah, exactly.
How have you been?
Oh my gosh. Oh, whoa. Oh my gosh. Whoa. Well, I have been good. My roommate in college, Audrey, who's still one of my best friends to this day, had a baby. And I'm not going to say the baby's name for privacy reasons, but I met the baby, and I love babies, and it was great. And like being in a stage where your friends are having babies I don't know. It's like weird. Like it should feel weirder, but it also just feels natural in a way as well. Like her husband asked me, does it feel weird to see her as a mom? And I was like, actually, not really. Like she is good at it. I don't know.
It kind of works. I know,
works.
Right? I don't have many friends that have kids at this point, but I do have one. And like, I knew her before she was a mom, but like seeing her as a mom, like, yeah, she's a great mom.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I've been up to. What have you been up to? What's been going on?
I've been having a nice chill time. I actually went and visited some friends with albinism in Long Island.
Yes, on the Long Island.
Long Island. It was fabulous. I had a great time. I ate knish.
It looked, she showed me, she ate a knish. She showed me pictures. It looked very like quintessential summer vibes with like so ice cream and the lake, or the ocean, rather.
The ocean, yeah, I know.
The ocean, not the lake. But yeah, very summer vibes. And I think that's really fun when you go on a summery trip to just feel like you're at camp or something.
Since we all have albinism, we all like self-tanned one night. It was so funny. And then we went out, we went on a boat. I learned how to dig for clams, which is something that I never thought I would learn to do, but it was actually really easy and very fun. So highly recommend it.
I love that. That's so fun.
It was fun. It was a great time.
So we've been enjoying our summer. We've been, visiting friends and having fun.
I know.
Summertime vibes.
We've been traveling a bunch, and we will continue to travel a bunch throughout the remainder of the summer. But it's all fun and exciting. So
yeah.
Oh my god.
We even have a travel with each other later this year, but we'll talk about that later. So exciting.
Don't get too excited yet. It's like late into the year, but it will happen, and it's very exciting.
But it will happen. It's very exciting. But I am so excited for this episode. A lot of you are super interested in hearing about guide dogs. I feel like, Cass, whenever you talk about guide dog stuff at like a conference, people come to the session. Like this is a topic that people want to hear about. And I know, Cass, you were a little bit like, well, I don't want to take over this episode and be the only one talking.
Because it's our show, right? People want to hear you, and that makes sense. They want to hear me together.
It makes sense. It does make sense. However, Cass is a guide dog user. I am not. I know a good bit about guide dogs just from being Cass's best friend and from having other friends with guide dogs. So, this will be more of her episode, and normally we do split the time, but I think it just makes a lot more sense since you are the expert here at Rare with Flair. You're not necessarily a guide dog expert, but of the two of us, of the two of us here at Rare with Flair, I'm going to officially dub you the expert
I'm honored.
of guide dogs.
And Casey,
it's not a very, it's against me, so.
No, for sure. And Casey knows a lot about dogs, period, right? Like, you know a lot about dogs.
That is true. I'm actually annoying about dogs. A lot of people, my sister being one of them, my sister, every time there's something wrong with her dog, she calls me, like as if I'm a vet.
Yeah.
You know, like she's
That's
like, Casey,
so
my dog is doing this thing. What do I do? And I usually do know. I'm like, oh, that's a backward sneeze. Like you just, weird things like that.
Yeah.
I'm annoying with dogs. Like even with, my friends' dogs. I'm like, oh, they're just doing
as
this.
a puppy, and like you did all the training. You did the potty training. You did all of the stuff.
Yeah.
So
and I've just and I'm a dog lover. I've been a dog lover ever since I came out of the womb. Like So I'm really excited for this episode. So if Cass talks a little more, I told her to. So don't be
I mean, your girl does love to yap, so I mean, we can just get right into it.
Let's get right into it.
Our friendly Casey will definitely be chiming in during my,
of course,
kind of a monologue of an episode, but so
I will love to chime in.
There are so many things to know about guide dogs and to consider if getting a guide dog is right for you. So we've had a lot of people request this topic, and I've held out for quite a while just because I'm like, this is going to be my episode. And so I have different subsections throughout this episode. I tried to break it up in a way that it was easy to understand, but like Casey said, this is something that people actually super want to know about.
Absolutely.
One of our listeners, Johanna, had reached out and asked if we would do an episode about this. And so, super happy to talk about my experience. And also just if you've ever considered getting a guide dog, these are the things that you should know and how to pick a school and all of these things. Okay. So we're going to jump right in. So, okay. If you've ever considered or wondered if you could qualify to get a guide dog, you may want to think about some of these things. How do you know if a guide dog is right for you? Number one, I think this goes without saying, but you have to be blind. So, there are lots of different kinds of service dogs for a variety of disabilities. I'm going to stick to talking about guide dogs who, by definition, guide someone who is blind. Now, we talk about this all the time. Blindness is a spectrum. So if you're on kind of the more sighted end of the spectrum, like myself, you can still qualify to be a guide dog handler. So you just have to know that if you have gone to your eye specialist and tested well out of the threshold of legal blindness, you very likely will not qualify to get a guide dog. So if your vision is 2100 best corrected or 2080, these are acuities for those who don't know, right? You probably can't qualify to get it because your vision is actually pretty dang good. Yay!
And of course, visual field comes into play as well, but we do not struggle. We don't struggle with that. Ours is simply acuity based, but that still qualifies you to be legally blind though.
It does.
If you have your visual field. So
yes.
You're either legally blind or you're not, basically is what we're saying.
Yeah, right. And an eye specialist will be able to tell you that. And of course, this is, we've talked about this before, this is best corrected. So, with your corrective lenses on and you are still in the threshold of 2200 measurably or worse, you would qualify. So, number two is, do you have an active lifestyle? Do you have a lifestyle that more or less necessitates the additional help / burden of having a working dog, right? So you have to be relatively independent. So you have to be able to navigate places by yourself, either taking transit or walking or some form of, you can get yourself from point A to point B, and you do that with relative frequency.
Mm-hmm. Because you want to use the dog.
Yeah.
Like, the
and
dog is there for you to use. They don't want the dog to be sitting at your house.
Absolutely. And this dog wants to work. Like, these dogs are trained, and they love the satisfaction that they get from helping someone. And if you're not really doing much, it might not work out for you. I think what also goes with this is, do you have good O&M skills? So O&M, orientation and mobility. Do you have good navigational skills that, you can command that dog to go to where you need to go? Your guide dog is not a GPS, so you can't tell it to take you to your local grocery store and it'll just do that.
It can't tell when the light has turned green.
Exactly. Dogs are colorblind.
On the crosswalk. You have to know. You have to tell. I think that's really actually a common misconception. Even I, as a young person, thought, the dog knows when to cross the street. And that's just not true. The blind person has to tell the dog when to cross the street. And you have to know. And, we'll talk later. You might talk later about what is it?
Intelligent disobedience. Yeah.
Intelligent disobedience, where they can, disobey you if you're saying the wrong thing. But anyway, you have to know these things.
You need to know these things. And, if you don't have the proper skills navigationally to be able to tell your dog where to go, you both are going to be lost. And that's not going to be very helpful for either of you, because your dog is depending on you to tell it which way to go. It's like a pilot, basically. Like, you're the one who, knows the way. You're like the navigator of a ship. You know which way to go, but you're asking someone to do the steering for you.
It's like air traffic control telling the pilot.
Yeah,
yeah. And I feel like a lot of people... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no. Go. I was just going to add on to that.
A lot of people want to bypass this step. They're like, oh, I'm going to get a guide dog before they really go through O&M training. And it's like, it is maybe a pain to do that, but you can't bypass these steps. You've got to learn your stuff first.
You can't. And more schools, and I mostly can speak specifically for my school, which honestly I should have given my qualifications before I started. But however, anyway, more and more schools are getting quite picky about this, because they have seen clients or handlers, school calls them clients, but guide dog handlers that go out into the world that are not prepared, and they'll know when you're in training, if you get that far and they realize that you don't actually have the skills that you need, they will send you home without a dog.
Yeah, these dogs cost a lot of money to train, and they're not playing around. So
no, absolutely not. And they want you to be safe too, because proper mobility skills and knowing when it's safe for you, a blind person, to cross the street in, a range of lighting, right? Like, Case, you and I can see pretty well ish relative to
pretty well for a blind person.
Pretty well for a blind person. That in decent lighting, since we've talked about our photosensitivity, right? In decent lighting, we could maybe see the light change on a crosswalk symbol, right?
Sometimes you can't.
If it's
sometimes you can.
Twilight, or if it's getting
sometimes
darker out, but the sun, it's cloudy maybe. But moment the sun's out, can't see a thing, right?
Right. Yeah.
So I need to know by relying on my other senses, like sound, I can cross the street now and it's fairly safe.
Yep.
So I wanted to spend a minute on that point, because it is truly so important to your success as a guide dog team if you know what you're doing. Yep. There are other things to consider when you are thinking about if a guide dog is right for you. So obviously just the sheer fact of you have a dog now. You have to be the primary person to take care of that dog. Whether you live with, your family, a spouse, a roommate or something, that dog is your responsibility. So, like, you need to act like it is and know that, you know, I'm going to get this dog and it's going to help me, but I need to be the one that's, like, doing all the stuff.
Yep.
Obviously, like, do you have dog allergies? It may not work out super well for you to have a guide dog if pet dander is a problem. Now, there are, like, hypoallergenic guide dogs. So there are some guide dog schools that train standard poodles. But they are, like, harder to get. Standard poodles are super smart. But, like, again, the wait list is quite long because there are a lot of people with allergies who would like a guide dog.
I know this is purely anecdotal, so like it doesn't really mean much, but I know they exist, but I've never seen a guide poodle, which means to me that they're rare because I know a lot of people with guide dogs and I just rarely I've never seen that personally. But
yeah, they are really rare. I think the only places I've really seen them is going to like a blindness conference, like the American Council for the Blind, or the National Federation of the Blind. You might see 1, maybe 2 guide poodles if you're lucky. But they're super uncommon. So, you know, just know if you have a dog allergy, it might be tough.
Yeah.
Obviously, like, besides caring for your dog, knowing, like, people that you live with, are they okay with you having a dog, right? Like, this is something to think about. Are they really not dog people, and would they be really bothered? Is it something that you could... Is it a situation you could move from or not? Like, you have to think about these things because this dog will eventually be a big part of your life. And if the people around you are not supportive of that decision, then maybe that's going to make that transition a lot harder for you.
Yeah, very true.
And then I think the last thing I'd written down for this bit is just like maturity. Like, are you ready to take care of a dog? Are you ready to navigate independently? Are you ready to deal with people around you? And you're gonna grow a lot when you have a guide dog, no matter how old you are when you get one. It is like a stretching experience for some, maybe more than others, but there's a lot more that you have to think about in life in general that is complicated. And so, like, are you ready to deal with that, or are you gonna call it quits? And if so, maybe wait.
Yeah, and before you move on from this section, I do want to say, like, as someone who is legally blind, who doesn't have a guide dog myself, I think a lot of people love dogs, which is, I said at the beginning of this episode, arguably, I was born more of a dog lover than Cassandra, actually.
Oh, yeah.
And,
Far beyond.
I'm just naturally... I'm naturally a dog lover. And so you might think, oh, well, then why wouldn't you get a guide dog? You love dogs. And I think a lot of people who love dogs just think, oh, I want a service dog. I want a guide dog. My dog can go everywhere with me. This is great. And a lot of young people who are blind might be kind of looking to their future and saying, oh, well, that is the option. Like, the option for me is getting a guide dog. And I think it is an incredible option for many, many people. And I think it's worth looking into. And I'm not discouraging anybody from doing that. But I think some of the reasons you listed, Cassandra, are applicable to me. So, like, I do have a dog allergies, not horrifically, but enough to be living with one might be difficult for me, or just being around one all the time. Because you're not even just living with your dog, you're taking it literally everywhere. So that's a problem. My dog Rupert, that you've all heard about, I'm sure, is hypoallergenic, and it does make a difference for me. And then another thing is, like, my lifestyle. I don't live in a very walkable city. If I did, I might actually reconsider trying out a guide dog, but I don't. I mostly am in a car with either, like, with my family or friends or Uber. And I don't, so even though I do go places independently, I'm not often walking. And so anyway, I just feel that it is a lot of work that goes into it. It is a lot of sacrifice, and you've got to weigh the pros and cons and see if the amount of work is worth it for you. And for many, it is. And so I'm not saying that I think it's a bad idea, but But yeah, I just wanted to give my 2 cents as someone who is a cane user. There are pros and cons. Cass and I often talk about the dog versus the cane just in our daily lives of the pros and cons. And that's a whole other topic, and we really don't have time to get into that necessarily right now. But the cane has its own pros and cons, but some people choose to be a cane user forever. You know, some people just choose like, okay, the cane is my mode of mobility, and that's what I'm going to do. So for now, I'm a cane user. I don't really foresee that changing for me personally, but yeah. Anyway, I just wanted to throw that in.
No, and I'm really glad you said all that, because I think having a guide dog seems like an attractive lifestyle to a lot of people, but you really have to consider your life as a whole. So I have a friend who, she had a guide dog, and then she's not looking at the moment to get a successor dog because she actually really likes the freedom and the flexibility that having a cane allows her to have. So, like, she likes, you know, being able to go and stay out late and not have to worry that she has a dog at home, or, you know, when she gets home, like, she can just throw her cane in the closet and literally not think about it for the rest of the night, right? Like, there are lots of advantages to having a cane that I don't know that we talk about enough, because, like, it's such a mixed bag.
Sure. Oh, absolutely. And like I said, whole other topic. And I think we have kind of touched on some of this in past episodes. And if you guys would like us to talk more about kind of cane versus dog too, that could be a whole other episode where we could really dive in, because there are so many pros and cons to that. And if you are thinking of getting a guide dog, I would recommend using a cane for a bit, because it does get you used to being stared at in public.
Yes. In a really different way, but still.
In a different way, but still.
You are getting lots of attention.
Because when you were saying earlier, Cass, you know, getting a guide dog makes you grow and change, I assume even more so than using a cane, just because it's such a responsibility. However, like, using my cane full time in New York and just like growing up and starting to use it, it also stretched me mentally, just having to be standing out all the time and getting attention all the time.
Oh, absolutely. You know? And I think, like, so that could go for anyone who's deciding to use any tool that's going to make them stand out and help their disability experience be a little bit easier at the cost of social norms getting quote unquote violated, right? Like, right. You're gonna get lots of attention, and with a guide dog, sometimes it's positive attention, sometimes it's negative attention, but like even the positive attention can be like overwhelming to some, maybe not to others. It really just depends your personality. But you know, if you have thought about getting a guide dog and you're hearing this and you're like, well, I don't know now, just, you know, think about it. And if you decide not to get a guide dog, there is nothing wrong with you. Like, you are totally valid.
Everybody's own path.
And also, like, your thoughts can change, right? Like that friend, she was a guide dog user, and now she's like a really happy cane user. You can adapt throughout your life, and that is a very fluid decision.
Like,
you have to.
Your life is going to change. Where you live is going to change. Your home life is going to change. Who you live with might change. That kind of stuff. So, and your pets at home, or if you have kids or whatever, is going to change. So. All the things.
So, like, my qualifications to talk about this topic, which I'm doing now actually because I want to kind of reflect on this last section, is so I got a guide dog when I was 19. Her name is Romana. She is snoring next to me, and she is retired as of last year. So I got Romana in 2016. She worked for about 8 years and retired in June of 2024. So she had a really great career, to be honest. And when I got her, I was a sophomore in college. So she did 3 years of undergrad with me. She did like 6, which included like internships that I had during the summers. One of which I lived in, we both lived in like the Seattle area. And then I did 6 months of like full-time work, and then she did COVID, like and that was tough because she was kind of at her peak. She was like 4 to 6, I think. And it's hard when your dog is like at their peak adult years and like you're in a global shutdown. And so, but I wasn't sure like how I'd heard of guide dogs retiring post-pandemic, and I wondered how would she adapt, and she adapted pretty well, actually. She still continued to work for a few years after that. Continued to travel a lot with me. Like, she traveled a ton, and then she retired. And so when I was originally back about 10 years ago, when I actually originally made the decision to apply for a guide dog, I was thinking, you know, at that time, I was going to school at Ohio State, one of the largest universities in the nation. And so I was walking all the time, everywhere. And in college, you are generally, even if you go to a pretty small school, you are walking a lot. So you are pretty active. Yeah. There's no doubt about that. I didn't have dog allergies. And, you know, I knew that regardless of where I was living, if I was going to be in a dorm, I ended up being in a sorority house when I came back with her from training. I knew that we were going to be, like, we're going to be allowed to live anywhere. And even if I had roommates, like, I would have to make sure, like, are they cool with that? There were lots of options to consider. But I wanted to give it a shot because it was really challenging to navigate such a massive campus with just a cane. And I tried without a cane, and it was really difficult, and I would run into things, and I felt like I looked worse than I did with a cane. So it was just a matter of, like, growing, and for me, it involved accepting, you know, my disability, and then I made the move to apply for a guide dog. So now that I'm reapplying, because Romana has retired, and it's been a long process, but in general, I had to reassess my lifestyle, right? I'm not in college anymore. I've been out of college for 6 years. And so I had to think, and I really had a moment even a few months ago while I've still been, you know, waiting for a successor dog. And I'm like, okay, is this still right for me? Because I'm not walking everywhere like I did in college. I walk to the gym a few times a week. I walk in a really big, massive office. And it was, but, you know, a lot of the places I go, I'm not in the most walkable city. Columbus is walkable enough in certain areas, but I couldn't walk to work from where I live. And so I'm getting in and out of a lot of cars, whether they're like ride shares or my friends. And so I had to think, like, is this still okay for me? But I also do travel a lot. I travel like once a month. And whether that's for work or for enjoyment, I am in unfamiliar locations often, enough that I feel like between the day-to-day and the unique, a dog would still get a good amount of work by being with me.
Definitely, yeah.
And it's hard to compare when you're in college versus like a full-on just working adult. You know, you have to be fair with yourself because you're not in college anymore. But
I've heard other people say that too, that got a guide in college. I have a friend that got a guide in college, and she was like, yeah, I don't know if I would do it again just because her life has really slowed down. But, you know, I think for you it does make a lot of sense with the amount you travel and all of that.
And life
it
does
is something
slow
to think
down.
about.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does. Like, college is maybe the most walkable any of us will ever be. Unless you live in like a huge city, you know, where most people don't drive, you know. But but I think for your lifestyle, it definitely makes sense.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. And, like, again, don't take my word for it. Different schools have more measurable thresholds, and they evaluate you on a person-to-person basis to really know. And, like, it can't hurt to just apply and see what they say. And I'll get to that process in a minute. But, like, you know, it's something that you need to think about is, am I going to give a dog enough work? So, moving on to how to pick a school. There are about 15 guide dog schools in the United States. So I'm not including Canada or other international guide dog schools, just thinking about the US. There are 15 options. And so you might wonder, well, how do I know which one is the right one for me? So I've got like 8 different factors that you can consider, and then I'll tell you about why I chose my school. You don't have to make the same choices I do, but if you ask a guide dog user, there are people who switch schools from getting one or more dogs from one school.
I've heard of this as well. But then a lot of people are very loyal to their school at the same time.
But often, people are... Yeah. They can be incredibly biased. So when I was like figuring out, I first saw guide dogs and learned about them more because I went to an American Council for the Blind conference 10 years ago. And it's actually fun and very circular that I'm going to an American Council for the Blind conference in like a week, in less than a week. And it's in the exact same place as the very first one I went to.
Oh, we love it.
We
Cass
love,
and I love this kind of thing.
A callback.
We love a callback.
But like, I hadn't really seen a lot of guide dogs before at the time, and in the albinism community, where Casey and I are really heavily involved, there weren't that many people with albinism that were using guide dogs, and so I started asking different people at ACB, people with varying degrees of vision. Some people were like more totally blind, some people had degrees of vision sort of like Casey and I do, and I was just asking them about their experience, and I got like many biased answers. But that is kind of how I decided to choose a school, was because, well, this seems popular. But if you want to do your research, here are the things that you should think about. Number 1, what kind of dog do you want? So different schools have different breeds available. Generally, you're going to get a retriever, a lab usually, because they're really reliable. They're very food motivated. And they are like a good size to be a guide dog too. So they're often not super huge, but you can get a big old lab too. But like the smallest labs could potentially be guide dogs if the person is small enough or if they have the right drive. You don't want a super small dog to be a guide dog, of course. So
Bunny can't be my guide dog?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I don't know. Maybe he's real strong, but
I think he would do a very bad job. For anyone,
he would have a lot of fun, though.
He would put me in danger every day. But I digress.
So, like, you have to also know that this dog, to an extent, is pulling you, right? So when that harness goes on, it's a rigid U-shaped harness, and there's like a strap that goes around their belly and on their chest. And so you hang on to the rigid handle part when the dog is working, and you give it commands, and that dog will pull you. And it can be, I mean, depending the dog, it can be quite a strong pull. Or Romana was always a very gentle puller. But regardless, that dog is guiding you literally. Like, it sometimes looks like they're just walking next to you, or they're just like a little bit ahead, but that like there's like tension there. So it has to be a dog that can handle that. Often there are German Shepherd guide dogs. If you want a German Shepherd guide dog, you need to find a specific school that trains German Shepherd guide dogs. So there are 2 that I really know of well. There's one that's called Fidelco that's out in Connecticut. I will put a list linking from the NFB with like all the guide dog schools so you can find all the information there. But Fidelco in Connecticut, I think they only train Shepherd, so if Shepherd is your thing, you can do that. I think the Seeing Eye in New Jersey, also all these names sound the same, to be honest. After you hear enough guide dog schools' names, like they sound the same. But the Seeing Eye, they were the first guide dog school in, I think, the country. That's where the term Seeing Eye dogs comes from.
Seeing Eye dog.
But, so the Seeing Eye does still train German Shepherds. There are a lot of schools that don't, because herding dogs can be a little bit more, like, unpredictable. They're maybe a little less food motivated. They can take a little longer to mature. is what I have heard. But don't take my word for it. Do your own research. If you want a shepherd, find a school with shepherds. I know if you want a standard poodle guide dog, I believe Guide Dogs of the Desert or Guide Dogs of America, one of those two, I think both are based in the West Coast area. One of them trains poodles, and I think even there's one in Columbus actually called Pilot Dogs. And I think they have other breeds. I think they even train like standard or rough collies and yeah, so if you want a unique breed, you can find a school that offers that if that's important to you.
Hypothetically, if I was going to get a guide dog, I'd be going for the poodle.
Right? And again, there are lots of things to consider. Some may be more important to you, some may not. Just you have to think through what matters to you the most. So there are different training methodologies. So different schools will rely on different techniques to train their dogs. Some are very, very much in the camp of positive reinforcement. So dog does a good thing, you reward dog mostly with food. There are other schools that train a little bit less with that, more with negative punishment, which sounds really scary, but it's not. Like, you're not really hurting the dog. But it's more corrective. So if a dog does something wrong, you kind of jerk back on the leash and let them know, hey, didn't like that. So there are people on either side of the fence, and there are schools on either side of the fence that can suit your fancy. Training duration. So when you get a guide dog, you have to train with your dog. Even if you've had a guide dog before, you need to learn, you need to start over. Or if it's your first time, you need to learn. So generally you go to their facility. I'll get to that in a sec, but you will be there for a number of weeks. It's kind of a process. And so you go out on routes with this dog and a trainer. They give you guidance, they give you suggestions, they tell you what to do in certain circumstances until you start learning how to connect with this specific dog, because every dog is different. So you need to learn how to reconnect or connect for the first time with a dog that is not your previous guide dog, and it's not like your pet at home, and it's just this is the dog.
Yep.
So training can last, depending on where you go, anywhere from 2 to I think 4 or 5 weeks. So
whoa.
Yeah, it can be quite lengthy. So
wow.
You need to
wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, right? Some have done 4 for first time users and then 2 for retrains, or
yeah.
It can vary. So, think about that also as you're applying to schools. Can you take off 2 to 4 weeks?
Yeah, you have to take off work or school, or, yeah.
Yeah, and, a lot, especially if you're in school, different guide dog training orgs can work well with you. When I went and got Romana, I got her in August of 2016, so it was right before starting the academic. I literally arrived and then had 1 day, and then we started class.
Yeah.
It was intense. And so know that, right? You may have to take time off. How much time can you afford? And, know that longer trainings, it's going to be more complete. It might be a little bit more relaxed. Shorter trainings might be pretty hefty and front loaded because they have to fit a lot in. So, know that. Number 4, home training. So, yeah, a lot of schools have this as an option. If you don't like air travel, you don't have the flexibility, also know that a lot of schools will, as part of getting your guide dog, will help you fund that travel. So they will pay for your travel and your lodging while you're there. But if you just can't take that time, you can find a school that does home training. So I don't know much about home training. I'm just gonna be so honest because I've never done it, and I don't think I've actually had like an in-depth conversation with someone who does. But it works with some people's lifestyles, and a trainer will come with your new dog, and you guys will work together in your familiar environment. So if that's something that sounds appealing to you, you can find a school that offers that. I don't know how long they last, so like that also probably is school dependent too. Some schools offer veterinary financial support. So they will help you pay your vet bills. Vet bills are really expensive.
Yes.
And it's not guaranteed that when you get a guide dog, I think all guide dogs are free. I don't think that I've ever heard of someone having to pay for a guide dog from one of these 15 schools. But veterinary support is not always guaranteed. This doesn't mean paying for like food or toys or grooming or other necessities. That is something that you will have to pay for, even at schools that do offer veterinary financial support. But there aren't that many that I know of that offer this. I know that Guide Dogs for the Blind does, and the Guide Dog Foundation also offers financial support. But I mean, speaking from experience from a school that does, it's actually it's massive, especially when I was a student.
Yeah.
Like,
oh yeah, definitely.
Crazy.
It can get out of hand.
Romana got really, really, really sick in February, and she had to spend a few days at MedVet, and GDB helped me, and it was so helpful because a MedVet visit is really pricey, and I'm just really grateful. And also, if you're looking for a place to donate, consider a guide dog school.
100%.
They do really
100%.
incredible work.
Yes, we can't say that enough.
Okay, another thing to think about is puppy raisers. I will talk about like the life cycle of dog training later in the episode, but basically the people who are helping your dog learn obedience and socializing your dog, they're volunteers. And different schools actually have different policies about how their clients, meaning you're the guide dog handler, should engage with puppy raisers. Some schools give you the option, kind of encourage it, but it's still up to you. Some schools like will do that during training. Some will do that a few months after training. Some schools prohibit it. They don't want you to talk to your puppy raiser. So it's a really mixed bag. Just know that, because puppy raisers also have an attachment and a fondness for your dog, because they spend a lot of time with it in its formative years.
Yeah.
So, that's a sensitive relationship to navigate. And if you really want to know your dog's puppy raisers, or if you don't, you can find a school for that.
Yeah.
Another thing to think about is dog ownership. So some schools will allow you to, after maybe a certain amount of time, quote unquote, own your dog, which basically just means that I think that you are the primary caregiver, and you can help decide what your dog's future is like. I think every school, even if they maintain ownership of the dog, will like allow you to have say in that. But if it's important to you that you are the owner of your dog, it doesn't really change very much from personal experience. But it is just a little bit more official. And maybe there's an aspect of this that I'm not really thinking about, but you just fill out a form. At least Guide Dogs for the Blind, where I got Romana and where I will be hopefully going back, they allow you to have ownership of your guide after you kind of successfully navigate your first year together, assuming everything is going really well. They kind of let you take the reins. I think basically they just do that in case something isn't working out well, and they can have the freedom of taking and replacing that dog themselves, and that's totally fair. So think about that as another factor. And then the last thing is location. It doesn't really matter as much because if you're open to traveling to the school, they will pay for you to do that. That's why I picked a school that's in California. But it's not, just know that also, like, wherever you're going to be training is that place. So when I went to train with Romana, we went to California. GDB also has a campus in Oregon, so you could also maybe go there if you applied to GDB. You could go to New Jersey. You could go to New York. You could go to Florida. I don't know. It's just like something to consider, and maybe that's important to you. Maybe you want to pick the closest one. Completely up to you.
Yep.
So, that's guide dog schools. There are many of them, and there are lots of factors, but I'm going to talk about the application process. What do you need to do to get ready? And I'll mostly speak about Guide Dogs for the Blind moving forward, because that's the school that I've experienced.
This is your personal experience you're sharing.
This is my personal experience. Take it with a grain of salt. I did also, when I first was applying to get a guide dog 10 years ago, I also applied to the Seeing Eye. I did get rejected from the Seeing Eye.
It happens. It does happen.
It does happen, especially when you are kind of at the more sighted end of the blindness spectrum. I think it really depends the way that your doctor writes it. They're not writing anything that's inaccurate, but we've talked about this before. Like, when you're getting tested in an eye doctor's office, you're generally getting tested in quote unquote perfect lighting. So
and lighting is a big deal for us. So
people like us that are super photophobic, like, that is a huge impact, and that's honestly a big reason why I think having a guide dog is helpful, is because walking outside in the bright sun is really hard. So,
and also just like our depth perception, like when you're testing visual acuity, you're not testing photophobia, depth perception, you're not testing any of that. Like, you're just testing, can you read this thing? And vision is so much more complicated than just that. And so, like, when we're walking outside, really our photophobia and depth perception, I would say, are two of the major factors of us not being able to walk independently very well down the road.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Definitely. Or, even if we can, it's very, very, very anxiety producing and potentially a little bit dangerous. So,
Right.
You have to be able to also have a report from your eye specialist that expresses all of these things. If you have other factors that impact your vision, especially outside or in variable lighting. And I don't think that my eye professional did as good of a job as the Seeing Eye would have wanted. So that is why they rejected me. No hard feelings against the Seeing Eye. I know people with albinism that have gone there and had great success. But it didn't work out for me, so mostly going to stick to talking about GDB, Guide Dogs for the Blind.
Yeah.
So first, there's generally like an online application. When I did the Seeing Eye, I can also say that was the case. You just pretty much fill out your basic information. You have to say and attest that you are blind. They can verify this later, but usually on your online application process, besides the basic info, they will ask you about some routes that you take from your home. So, do you go from your home to the library, or places that you can walk to independently that are a certain threshold away from your house, maybe like a quarter of a mile. So I think I had to list like 2 or 3 of those. So if you're thinking about applying, also maybe start to think about, where do I travel often independently? When I was in college, I put from my dorm to the Panera that was several blocks away. So if that goes well, generally they will give you a phone interview. So they will ask you a lot of questions, mostly about your lifestyle. Like we've been talking about this episode, that is actually one of the biggest and most important factors for whether or not a guide dog is right for you. So they'll ask you, about what your typical week looks like, and you'll tell them I go to work on these days. Or when I was reapplying, I was still working a hybrid schedule, so I was saying like I go to work like twice a week, and we walk in the office, and then I walk to the library another day of the week, or I walk to the grocery store. And so they just want to know that you have an independent lifestyle and you can express that well. And they'll probably ask you about some addresses or places that you go, or about some of those routes that you put on your online application. They might ask you if you use any tools now, like a white cane. It's not a requirement that you use a white cane, because I know people who have guide dogs who didn't really use a white cane very much. I think when I was applying the first time, they recommended I use my cane more often. And I think like what Casey said earlier, it's also just helpful to get used to having something in your hand that is a tool that's helping you, and also dealing with people around you looking at you.
Yeah. Using
Visibly
your own
identifying,
skills,
I have a disability.
Visibly identifying as having a disability. You don't want to go from 0 to 100. I think like a cane is a good stepping stone, a good bridge.
Yeah.
Between nothing and the guide dog.
Right. You don't have to, again, but...
Yeah. But
I was suggested it when I had first applied, and then I did use it. I used it maybe like 50% of the time. They're like, can you use it 75% of the time? And I was like, maybe. So then I did that.
Yeah.
So another thing they might ask is about your health. So it's also really important that you're physically healthy enough to be active and also to take care of your dog. If you're not physically healthy enough to take care of yourself, it's going to be very challenging for you to take care of a dog. So they're going to ask you about your health, and that'll come into play later, but they'll ask you a lot of questions about this. So just stick around for those. And then any preferences you might have for a dog. So you can be as picky as you want. Just know that you might end up waiting a lot longer for the very specific dog you want. But you could say, I want a Lab Golden Cross, or I want a black lab with yellow eyes, or I want a tall dog, or I want a fast dog, or
girl or boy, right?
Or I want a boy. So you can be picky. Or you can just say, which is what I've pretty much done for all the dogs, all the times I've applied, twice, I just want the best match for me.
Yeah. Not to say if I were doing it, that's what I would do as well. But, not to say you can't have preferences, but I would do the same. I would just say, give me what you think is best.
And obviously, like, having a preference doesn't mean you're not going to have a good match. But I know people that are specific, and so... if you want to be specific, you can.
Yeah.
After your phone interview, if that goes well and they think that you would be a good candidate to continue the application process, you'll have to submit medical documentation. And so this can be a little bit time consuming until your medical professionals get everything back. So they want something from your primary care, certifying your health. If you haven't gotten a physical in the past year, they will ask you to go get a physical. Also, if you see a mental health specialist for any reason at all, they want something from your mental health specialist to show, like, hey, we are working together, we're in a stable state, well enough to care for my dog, all that good jazz. So they will also send something to your therapist if you have one. And if it's your first time applying to that school, you have to provide documentation from an O&M specialist saying, yes, I did learn O&M. So when I was in college, I was a freshman when I applied, I got my O&M specialist that I worked with in high school to fill out the paperwork. I also worked with one when I had first gotten to college because campus was massive and it was very challenging to get around. And so I asked him to fill out paperwork as well. And obviously, we've talked about it, your eye evaluation. This is when that comes into play. They're going to get documentation from your eye specialist, whether that's an optometrist, an ophthalmologist, a low vision specialist, whoever you see. They need to verify that you're blind medically. And that's all the paperwork. So if that looks good and they don't reject you for not being blind enough, then you will move on to the home interview. So again, this is exciting and it takes time to schedule, but a trainer will come out and visit you and they will see you walk around. So a trainer came to my house most recently a couple years ago and they were like, walk to a place. So I walked to the grocery store near me, and it's about a mile away, or about 3/4 of a mile maybe. And so Romana was still working more actively at the time, so I had her do it. But when I did it my very first time to the Panera down the street from my dorm, I had a white cane, and so then I walked with my cane, and they want to make sure that you can cross a street, so there should be a street crossing involved in that. Make sure that you are confident doing it and know what you're doing. And they will observe you. They'll walk several feet behind you and not talk to you, and they will just watch you walk, and it's a little bit awkward because you want to make conversation, but you can't. But they're watching to make sure that you are doing all the things that you need to do.
Yep.
Then you will do what's called a Juno walk. So a Juno walk is really interesting, and it's kind of a challenging thing to wrap your head around if you've never done one before. But basically, a trainer takes an empty guide dog harness, so no dog in the harness, just that U-shaped handle that I was talking about earlier, and they just fasten the straps, and the trainer kind of holds it at the front where the dog's chest might be, at the height maybe that you might have a dog, and they'll basically simulate what it's like to work with a guide dog, and they'll have you they'll kind of guide you through performing different commands and make sure that you feel confident with that. And it's just kind of a fun experience too. So
that's really cool. Yeah,
it's really cool. So instead of giving commands to like a real dog's name, it's called a Juno walk because your fake invisible dog is named Juno.
Oh, that I did not know that's why that was called that.
So I think there's probably like a real reason why, but every time you give a command while you're on a Juno walk, you say Juno forward, Juno halt. Like
I think that's great. I think that's great.
It's really fun.
Is it always Juno, not just at your not just at Guide Dogs for the Blind, or is that just a Guide Dogs for the Blind thing, or do you know?
I think that's a typical thing. Yeah. It's a Juno.
Okay. Well, I know the walk is typical, but I was just wondering if the name, like the Juno.
Yeah, I think the verbiage Juno walk is like consistent through guide dog trainings.
I just think of Juno like the movie. Like
I know.
I think of like walking as a pregnant person or something. Like the Juno walk is when you walk with a big pregnant belly.
With a giant belly. Yeah, it's so funny. But I don't actually know the origins of this, so if someone wants to look that up and email us, hello@rarewithflair, please give us the history of Juno walk.
Juno walk, please.
But
we love a history fun fact around here.
I know, right? Man, I miss history fun facts.
We miss that,
So they'll also, when I had my home visit done a couple years ago, they'll also get like a pace assessment on you to see like walking at your preferred speed to find a dog that is relative to that speed. You don't want, if you walk really fast or if you walk quite slow, you don't want a dog that's like raring to go or super, super slow. So you gotta have that good match. And at Guide Dogs for the Blind, they use like the Runkeeper app to give a good pace assessment. So they'll do that while you do your Juno walk, but they will simulate guide dog behavior. So they'll make you stand in the correct position, and then you can say Juno forward. Excuse me, and you're hanging onto a leash, and then they'll show you what it feels like when a dog might slow down, and you want to give it a cue command to go faster. I think at GDB and I think some other schools that they use the command hop up, so you can say hop up, and the dog, like the trainer, will move faster as if the dog is obeying your command. They'll pretend like the dog is distracted, so they'll show you how to give a correction or how to refocus your dog's attention, and then the trainer will like make the harness move as if the dog stopped to sniff something, and then you like, Juno, no, and then you correct and move forward. So like it's really fun, and it's really neat, and it gives you a really good idea of what it might feel like with a real dog inside if you've never done it before. I remember doing this when I was in college. I was like, wow, that's crazy. Like,
yeah,
I think it was the first time that I really got to try it, and I got to feel what the pressure on the harness would feel like, and know I could close my eyes and walk and feel safe if I had a dog that I trusted.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's crazy. It's super fun, and you'll get to do a Juno walk, and then you'll have a little preference chat. So if you have more preferences, they'll tell you about your pace maybe, and they'll ask you more if you have any match preferences, and so they'll note those down. Then the big evaluation comes, so the school will take all of the data that they have on you, including what the trainers noticed at your home visit, everything from your doctors, everything that you told the home interview, and they'll put it all together, and a committee will decide your fate.
Oh my gosh.
Very exciting. But
May
also
the odds be ever in your favor.
Right. Obviously, I'm biased, and I'm going to plug GDB because if they decide that you might need more O&M training skills that you don't currently have at the time that you applied, and maybe you got rejected because you didn't, GDB actually has a relatively new program called OMI. It's the Orientation and Mobility Immersion program. And I think they have options of home training where a trainer will come and work with you and teach you those good O&M skills, or you could go out to one of their campuses and like work with a trainer. This doesn't mean you're going to get a dog, but it's like an O&M intensive where you'll really, really get those skills down. They also do a lot. I was listening, GDB has a podcast called Central Bark.
Cute.
So they were talking about it, and they do a lot of evaluations there. So if you're not super physically active, you may not know a lot about your body. And so something that they'll do is they'll do like a physiology exam where they'll like know if you seem to be leaning toward one side. Maybe you might benefit from physical therapy. They'll do like an audiology exam. If you have hearing loss, it could be hard to know when it's time for you to cross the street. So they'll do a lot more than just O&M at this. And I'm not, obviously, like, GDB is a nonprofit. They're not, they're not asking me to say any of this, but I think that's a really cool and very unique opportunity. If you really, really want a guide dog, or if you just want to improve your O&M skills and you might not have the means to do it, maybe check that out. I'll link that in the show notes. Also, like, check out your state's Commission for the Blind, whatever it might be called. They all have different names. And they can hook you up with an O&M specialist so that you can learn those skills if you don't currently have them. And then after your evaluation, if you get accepted, hooray, hooray, you're on the path to getting a guide dog. Now it's time to hurry up and wait. So there are a lot of people who are also really qualified and are also on the list to get a guide dog. And depending on preferences that you might have for gender, color, breed, or pace, which is also sort of a preference, but kind of a more necessary one.
Yeah.
You might be waiting a little bit longer than others. And so it really varies. It's hard to say. I think now most schools are out a good ways post-COVID, so they might be back at the levels that they were at pre-COVID. GDB was hit pretty hard by that, and they lost a lot of volunteers too. So it's been a little bit of a waiting game for me this time around, but I am optimistic because maybe I might go back soon.
Oh, really?
Maybe.
Oh, wow.
We'll see. But
wow,
I did just, this is it can be hard to wait. And I know that there are lots of people who have also been waiting quite a long time. And so if you're on the list and you're accepted but waiting for your right match, just know that they will be there. Trust the process, as we used to say in Sorority Rush. But your match will come to you.
Oh.
And and also, if you want to stay connected with the community, you can do that. You can prepare by getting to hang out with other dogs, getting used to having dogs around you, or if you want to, buy new dog supplies. If you have a lot of time to wait, you can kind of stagger it so that you're not buying it all at once and it's a big expense. So over time, you can be like, I'm going to buy some bowls, or I'm going to buy some toys, and see what works. Hold off on buying important things like food, because the school will tell you what the dog is eating. So that's fine.
Right. Makes sense.
And then once you get the call, sometimes they might be able to tell you at the moment when you get accepted. So like when I got accepted back in 2015, they told me I would come in about 9 months. And so they might be able to give you that knowledge up front. They might not. Just like be aware of that. And if you have kind of a tentative date, just, work toward that and think that your match will come sooner rather than later.
Your match will come. Be patient.
So the last thing, I know that this is quite long, but the last thing I just wanted to talk about is, what about the dog? What are they going through while you're doing all this preparing?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So there's a fantastic, again, plugging GDB because they're my school, okay? I have to be true to my school.
Be true to your school, just like you would to your girl or guy. Be true to your school. Let your colors fly. Be true to your school. I don't even know who sings that, but... Oh, it's the Beach Boys?
The Beach Boys.
Shut up. No, you're right. You're totally right. You're totally right. Anyway.
So, being true to my school, I will also recommend there is a fantastic documentary called Pick of the Litter by GDB.
So good. It's so good.
It's so good.
It makes me cry. It makes me cry.
Oh, yeah. If you love dogs, this will make you cry. Even if you don't cry, which I don't, but it's just so fun to watch dogs. So, it was released, I want to say, 2018. And... Guide Dogs for the Blind did it, and they put it in the Sundance Festival, and it was released at some theaters, but you can now rent it on streaming platforms like Amazon and whatnot. But it follows this litter of puppies, and you see them be born, and they're named, and then you pretty much watch the puppy raising process. And it's really, really fascinating. And it's so exciting, and you want to see which of these dogs is going to move on to formal training. So I highly recommend it if you are at all interested in this subject, or if you just like dogs.
Oh, I do too. Even if you're not interested in getting a guide, it's worth a watch for anybody.
Oh, it's it's so interesting.
Oh, it's great. It's fascinating.
It's such a world unto itself.
Sweet. It's emotional. It's great. It's lovely.
Oh, yeah. It's full of heart, and the dogs are really just so sweet.
Obviously. So cute. Yeah.
Love. So following their process, there was also a Pick of the Litter mini series, and I'm very, 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 very upset about it because it was made on Disney Plus, and Disney Plus took it off their platform, and now it just doesn't exist.
That's awful.
It's infuriating
because it was so good.
It was really well done.
That is infuriating. That's devastating.
Yeah.
I hate when streaming stuff removes it and then it ceases to exist.
It's almost like lost media now. I would purchase it if I could. I would buy that on physical DVD, but I can't.
That's awful.
So that followed the dogs that had made it through the puppy raising phase, and that was the formal guide dog training, and then also getting matched and the training of when you go and train with your new dog. So it was really fantastic, and I hope that if it ever comes back, I'll let y'all know. But so far it's not there. But at least you can watch the movie. Mm-hmm. So I'll try to run through this pretty quickly because I know that we're already quite long. But so dogs are bred. The breeding process is quite involved, actually. So they have to consider a ton of factors like temperament and health and all of these good things, also just like physical appearance or color or, you know, I don't know. Like there are so many factors that go into breeding, and it can, it's impressive. And GDB is the largest guide dog school. And so they have now this like puppy, what is it? I forget the name of the building, but it's like the puppy building. And basically like they do all of this work training these, like matchmaking these dogs to find and get good litters that have a high likelihood of success of being guide dogs. And those breeding dogs are like in foster homes while they're having their babies. Like it's really sweet. And then they're born, and they get, for that first 8 weeks, they get a lot of exposure. So in this like big puppy facility that GDB has, at least, again, I can only speak to them, they have a lot of different types of toys because puppies don't know anything. And so they're exposing them to different, like babies, right? Babies don't know what different sounds and objects are. And so they're getting exposed just like you would with like a human baby. You have different surfaces for them to walk on. You have to teach the dogs to go downstairs because dogs don't know how to go downstairs until
I
they're
had to
taught
do that.
to do so. Just like a baby, you know?
It was a pain in the butt.
Yeah?
Yes.
Did he stumble a lot? That's so cute.
Not really. He just wouldn't do it. He was scared.
Oh,
and he,
no.
Would not. I have videos. I need to send you some videos of cute little
I would love
baby
to see
Rupert.
that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's crazy.
It's hard. And so, like, all that hard work that Casey did, GDB is kind of doing behind the scenes. They have a whole team that snuggles and plays with puppies, basically.
So
but also, in the name, I know, right? It's like the ideal job. But, like, in the name of exposure, because these dogs need to, like, learn environments. So once they've had that period, and when they're about 8 weeks old, they've had all their, like, baby shots, they get to be part of the puppy raising process. And so these are volunteers that open up their home to have a guide dog puppy from anywhere from, you know, a few weeks to up to a year. And they do some of the most important heavy lifting work imaginable. Like, it is impressive and crazy. And I do really so appreciate anyone who's ever raised a puppy. They do obedience training. They do toilet training. They do reinforcing routines. They socialize these puppies in training. So while they're in training, they're not like service dogs. So you can't take them everywhere. But you can take them a lot of places so that they get used to a lot of different sights and sounds and people and things. And so this is really helpful for a dog so that if they're not socialized, they become more anxious, and it's a lot harder for them to be a guide dog in who knows what environment.
Yeah, guide dogs have to be exposed to so many different environments, even way more than a regular pet dog. So, yeah.
And, like, these dogs are not afraid, generally, like, they're not really afraid of thunder. They're not really afraid of fireworks because they've been exposed from, like, such an early age. They kind of have to get used to it or else.
Oh, yeah.
And all the while, they're getting, like, monitored and tested. So there are checkpoints that they have to reach. You'll see it in the movie because I know y'all are going to go watch the movie.
Oh, yeah.
But I kind of want to rewatch it right now.
I know.
But
now
anyway,
I'm like, oh.
I want to see it. But they have to
the same
pass
way.
certain thresholds. They have to, you know, manage the distractibility. And if they're not going to do well, they will flunk out, which is also called career changing.
Career change, because it sounds nicer than failing out. Career change sounds a lot nicer.
But it is a career change. So some
Yes, it quite literally
career-changed
is.
dogs can actually go on to be a different kind of service dog. So GDB partners with, well over 50 different service dog training orgs or working dog training orgs, that a puppy that might not quite hack it as a guide dog, which, I mean, not to brag, but a guide dog is one of the most, like, elite types of service dogs. Like, they have to do everything
It
well.
literally is. Yeah, that's so
It's
true.
really hard.
Yeah.
So
Truly.
them failing out is not an indictment on the dog. Honestly, it's just, like, really hard to become a guide dog. You have to be the pick of the litter. And so if you're
They're
not...
probably still a really smart and great dog in many, many
Oh, they're
ways.
probably a fantastic dog because they've been bred
probably
really well too.
Even better than the average dog in many ways.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah,
But
for
also
sure, but
might not work out. So
yeah.
if that's the case, they can try to be a dog for someone with diabetes or a different kind of service dog that might work better for that specific dog. But
Yeah.
you know, a pet is also a career, and it's an important one, right, Rupert?
It is important. They change lives. They
change
their
lives.
I'm looking at Rupert right now.
Love.
I'm not going to do the full dog voice so that I don't scare everyone, but it's hard for me
Oh, I love it.
not to.
If they succeed through the puppy raising process, Romana had a couple different raisers. She had one for about 6 months and then another. Then they get the full health workup. And they're getting health checkups throughout the time, but they really get an intense workup. And they'll check for anything. They'll check for signs of potential hip dysplasia. Obviously, your dog's going to be walking a lot. You don't want it to have faulty hips because then your dog will have to retire, and that'll be really hard. So they'll do a full workup. They want to make sure that your dog is in the best shape possible. And if they're in great health, they can move on to what GDB calls dog college or formal guide work training. And this process is about 8 weeks long, and they learn so much in what feels like a pretty short time, only 2 months to learn to become a guide dog.
That's crazy.
Like, cram all your 4 years of education into 2 months, and
Yeah. They're so
it's
smart
intense.
to be able to do that. Yeah. It's amazing.
I know, dogs are so, like, crazy smart. When every time
Yeah.
I think about it for too long, I'm like, wow, dogs are so smart.
Yeah.
So they'll learn basic guide work commands. They'll learn how to stop at specific obstacles, like stopping at curbs when you're at the corner of a street, or stopping at stairs when you get to the bottom or top step, or then they'll learn things that are like a little bit more advanced, and they'll go on escalators and train platforms and public transportation. They'll go in malls and food courts and all these different environments, and they've got to stay focused because now they're working. And then they learn what Casey mentioned earlier. They call them traffic checks when it happens, but the behavior by the dog is called intelligent disobedience. And so how does a dog deal with an oncoming car? And this is one of the greatest advantages over a cane that you can have with a working dog, is that it has a brain, and your dog can potentially save your life.
Yeah.
So
Truly.
if a car is coming and you tell your dog to go forward, your dog can refuse the command in favor of your safety as a team.
Yeah.
And it's so impressive every time that it's happened. It happens, you know, even if you're really good at O&M and if you're pretty solid crossing streets, it happens more often than you would like. And especially when I was walking around a lot more when I was in college, and it is so scary. And then you just get this insane flood of love and relief because your dog just kept you safe. There are times where your dog might have to, and they have to choose so fast which behavior is appropriate. Do they ignore you? Do they stop in the middle of executing a command? Like you tell it to go forward, and once Romana and I were walking, and she stopped me in the middle of a super busy street, and I was like, oh my gosh, what's going on? And I like put out my hand. It was super bright. I didn't know, and I felt that van go by.
Ah!
And it was crazy. She saved us. Like, it was nuts. Or your dog might have to back up. If a car is backing into you and you aren't aware of it, your dog, and they'll pull hard. Like, they'll go back. And you're like, oh my gosh, like, well, this is not normal. And so you have to know that your dog might be doing something wrong, but they might be doing it to save your life.
Wow.
And that's something they have to learn in that 2-month cram span.
That's wild.
But they have tons of fun while they're at guide work training. They stay in the kennels. They usually have a roommate, which is super cute. they get to go on like community runs, so they have lots of toys and they get to play with other training dogs, or sometimes they get to stay in a foster home, or when it's really hot out, they get to go in the kiddie pools and splash around. So it might be busy, but they still have a really, really fun time, and they have so much fun working and earning treats as their positive reinforcement rewards that, I mean, who wouldn't want to be in dog college?
Truly.
But that is kind of my guide dog spiel. It is so long. I'm really glad that you guys stuck through it, because
well, and there's so much more you could say, and we would love to even, I'm speaking for me, but I think we would love to even do another episode, maybe going through more of this, but this is a great intro, and I think going to be so helpful for so many people.
It is absolutely jam-packed with information. And again, I am not an expert. I'm just mostly speaking from what I have learned as a handler going through the process, and also what I've learned from other guys, and even what you've learned from other guide dog users.
Right.
So if you have more questions, I mean, I would say I'd be happy to answer it, but honestly, if you really have questions, I would recommend reaching out to someone who you know who has a guide dog, or reaching out to a school that you might be interested in and ask them questions, and I'm sure that they would love to tell you about it.
Yeah, because you really covered the basics. So if anybody has other questions, they're probably more specific things that like maybe the specific schools can answer. But you covered so much, and if the people listening also watch Pick of the Litter, that covers a lot. Like we said, I'm sure there are a lot of YouTubers who have talked about this at length. We're not the first like people on the internet to come and talk about this, but being long form like a podcast is actually so helpful to really get into the weeds of everything going on. So like I even learned some things from you, and I know I didn't talk a ton, but I wanted you to get all this information out, because I think it is so important, and that's what our show is for. Like, this is why we have this show. So
yeah, absolutely. And I love talking about this, and it can be, I mean, clearly I've filled like an entire hour. Like, I've talked about this at conventions before, and I've never ceased to be amazed by all that I learn from other guide dog users. But I remember, I'll leave you with one last thought, and we will, see in 2 weeks. But like, I remember when I was about to go to train, when I went to an ACB conference in 2016, so the month before I got Romana. And I saw a panel of guide dog handlers, and the moderator of the panel had asked everyone who was on the panel, do you feel like you got a guide dog at the right time in your life? And every single person, regardless of the struggles that they had that first go around, or how challenging their first year was, every single person said yes. And, whenever you decide that a guide dog could be the right thing for you, and if it works out, and if you get accepted, and if all of these things happen to come together, right? Of course, it's a very involved process, but I would have to agree. Like, was I young at 19, and did I have a ton to learn? Oh, yes. I learned so much, and Romana was very patient with me. But I'm so glad I got a dog when I did. I think it was really, really important for my growth as a young adult, and hopefully guide dog number 2 will also be important to my growth as an adult.
I think so. I think they'll always make an important splash in your life at whatever phase you're in. So yeah,
it's great. And baby girl has not stirred once, so anyway.
I'm looking over at Rupert right now. He's sleeping.
I'll give him a big squeeze.
He's sleeping really cute. But thank you, Cass, for sharing with us your knowledge. Thank you, listeners, for joining us again. And we love you. And we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Bye.